In a stunning turn of events, Buckingham Palace released a midnight statement that sent shockwaves across the globe. King Charles had signed a sealed decree removing Camilla's children from the royal line of succession. But this wasn't just a bureaucratic decision, this was personal. And behind this bombshell lies a war that's been simmering for years, hidden in plain sight. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The clock had barely struck midnight when the royal household made its move. No grand press conference, no public appearance, just a tightly worded, sealed statement, quiet, cold, and devastating. By the time Britain woke up, the news had already detonated across social media and tabloids alike. Camilla's children Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes were officially and permanently removed from any place within the royal line of succession. A move unprecedented in modern royal history. But this wasn't simply about protocol. It wasn't about laws or titles. It was the unraveling of an internal war that had remained hidden from the public for far too long. Insiders say the statement had been scheduled for release much earlier, but was strategically pushed to the darkest hours of the night. Why? To control the narrative, to suppress immediate outrage, and to limit the time royal correspondents had to prepare their counterspins. But the plan backfired. By dawn, headlines screamed betrayal. Commentators were scrambling to explain a decision that even veteran palace experts hadn't seen coming. Yet one thing was crystal clear. This decision was not made in haste. Leaked whispers from close aides suggested the tension had been building for months. The language used in the decree, precise, surgical, final, gave the clearest signal that this wasn't just a course correction. This was an exorcism, a deliberate, emotion-fueled removal. Meanwhile, Camilla's response was deafening in its silence. No statements, no appearances, not even the expected walk outside Clarence's house. For a queen who had become increasingly visible in the public eye, her absence was its own kind of message. While the cameras zoomed in on King Charles attending a remembrance event the next morning, royal observers noticed something chilling. He wore no smile, no warmth, just a stony resolve etched into his face, as though he had carried out a necessary punishment he could no longer delay. Some said Charles appeared burdened, others believed he seemed liberated, but behind that carefully composed expression was a man who had just detonated a political landmine beneath his own marriage. Those close to the inner circle began leaking fragments of conversations from the palace corridors. He knew it would come to this, one source revealed. It was always going to be Camilla or the crown. Another hinted that the final straw had come weeks ago, when a confidential memo reached the king's desk outlining unacceptable power plays linked to Camilla's children. In one sentence, the monarchy had changed. No further explanation was offered, no apology issued, just a monarchy drawing a bloodline boundary, with Camilla's children on the wrong side of it. But to understand the full weight of this decision, we need to trace the cracks that began forming long before Charles became king, cracks that started deep within the Queen's final days. She was never meant to wear the crown. Camilla's journey from mistress to monarch was one of the greatest image overhauls in royal history, but her path to power left behind enemies, secrets, and a trail of compromises that would one day come back to haunt her. When Camilla first entered the public consciousness, it wasn't through the front gates of Buckingham Palace. It was through the back door of scandal. Branded the third person in the most famous marriage of the century, she bore the full brunt of public scorn in the aftermath of Diana's tragic tale. For years, her name was synonymous with betrayal. The press vilified her, the public rejected her. Even members of the royal family refused to acknowledge her presence. But behind the scenes, Charles was resolute. He didn't just love Camilla, he believed in her. And that belief became a mission, to make her palatable, then respectable, and finally, royal. It was a calculated campaign of redemption, and it worked, at least on the surface. Charles never let go of the idea that Camilla deserved more. Every public step they took together was rehearsed, rebranded, and repackaged to soften the edges of their story. And when Queen Elizabeth finally gave her reluctant blessing, calling for Camilla to be known as Queen Consort upon Charles's accession, It was not a gesture of affection, it was a closing of ranks, a compromise wrapped in tradition. But even that endorsement did little to dissolve the quiet resistance bubbling underneath. Senior staff whispered behind closed doors. Royal cousins avoided shared events. And Charles's sons, particularly William, never quite forgot what had been lost for Camilla to rise. After the coronation, Camilla's influence grew rapidly. What began as minor ceremonial duties transformed into real political leverage. She handpicked her aides, redirected charity initiatives, and reportedly began reshaping the royal household to mirror her own inner circle. And within that circle, her children, Tom and Laura, started to appear more frequently at high-profile functions, gaining access, proximity, and visibility usually reserved for those born into the House of Windsor. It didn't go unnoticed. Royal watchers began to ask the uncomfortable question: were Camilla's children being groomed for something more? The tension was subtle, but it was there, unmistakable to those who knew where to look. Seating arrangements at major events raised eyebrows. Camilla's son was rumored to have dined with foreign dignitaries. Her daughter's foundation received royal endorsements once reserved only for blood heirs. Palace aides who dared question the protocol were quietly moved aside. It was never official. It was never announced. But within the walls of the monarchy, Camilla's children were slowly being treated as unofficial royals. And with every step they took closer to the heart of power, the monarchy's foundation trembled. Because Camilla's ascension wasn't just the story of a woman overcoming public hatred, it was also the story of a fragile truce between old power and new ambition, between acceptance and intrusion, between the crown's survival and its slow unraveling. And while Charles continued to balance his heart and his heritage, he failed to see the shadow forming behind him. But Camilla wasn't the only one with ambitions. Her children, Tom and Laura, were quietly building power bases of their own, and that's when the real conflict began. Behind closed doors, royal insiders had long whispered about Tom Parker Bowles's growing confidence. As the Queen's son, he wasn't content with fading into obscurity. He wanted influence, recognition, and maybe even something more. At first it seemed harmless, charming even. Tom Parker Bowles, the food critic, the affable media personality, the son who kept things light while others bore the crown's burden. But those in the palace began noticing subtle shifts. More invitations to exclusive aristocratic gatherings, more front-row seats at political fundraisers, more appearances where no official role had been given. It wasn't coincidence, it was calculated positioning. Tom had learned the art of soft power and he was using it, quietly, persistently, and with the unmistakable air of someone who believed he belonged. What once looked like social climbing was beginning to resemble something much more structured, something closer to a campaign. Parliamentary sources reported private dinners with MPs and titled donors, meetings that were never officially acknowledged, but always remembered. One former aide recalled seeing Tom emerging from a discreet Westminster exit, flanked by two well-known lobbyists. "He's not just networking," the aide said. "He's negotiating." Whispers swirled that Tom was eyeing a ceremonial appointment to the Privy Council, a role that, while symbolic, would have granted him access to briefings and political prestige far beyond what most stepchildren of monarchs ever dreamed of. That ambition, to some, was bold. To others, it was deeply unsettling. Inside the royal household, concern was mounting. Senior staff grew uneasy at the increasingly deferential tone being used when referring to Tom in planning meetings. One reportedly warned, "If we start treating him like royalty, the public will too." And then it becomes irreversible. The line between blood and bond had always been fragile, but Tom's actions were eroding it with every high-profile handshake and curated interview. He wasn't just basking in his mother's shadow, he was stepping into the light, casting his own. King Charles, who had once fought tirelessly for Camilla's acceptance, now found himself in a moral and constitutional dilemma. On one hand, he admired Tom's confidence. On the other, he feared its implications. In one private conversation overheard by staff, Charles reportedly muttered, "He's acting like a future prince and he isn't." That wasn't just an expression of annoyance. It was a signal, a warning, a realization that Tom's ambitions were beginning to challenge the very structure of royal legitimacy. For Queen Camilla, the situation was agonizing. Torn between maternal loyalty and the preservation of royal order, she found herself increasingly isolated. Defending her son felt like betrayal. Staying silent felt like surrender. And all the while, Tom pushed forward oblivious, or perhaps indifferent, to the chaos he was quietly creating. With every speech, every event, every photo op, he wasn't just rewriting his story, he was redrawing the boundaries of who could belong in the inner sanctum of the monarchy. But Tom wasn't acting alone. Laura, Camilla's daughter, had her own ambitions, calmer, quieter, but far more dangerous to the palace's sacred order. Laura had always stayed in the background, a gallery owner, a family woman, never one for the spotlight. But when whispers surfaced of secret meetings with Duchess Sophie and Princess Anne, alarm bells began ringing at the top. Laura Lopes had always been the quiet counterweight to her brother's ambition. Where Tom Parker Bowles craved attention, Laura mastered the art of influence without visibility. Her demeanor was graceful, understated, and consistently avoided controversy, exactly the kind of energy the monarchy prided itself on. But behind that calm exterior was a woman whose presence was far from passive. She didn't need press conferences or political connections. She built her influence through relationships, the kind forged over long dinners, whispered confidences, and shared causes that, on the surface, seemed benign. But there was nothing accidental about her proximity to power. Royal watchers began to notice her appearing at charity events tied closely to Princess Anne's personal initiatives. The two were often seen deep in conversation, unusual, considering Anne's famously guarded nature. Even more curious was Laura's increasing engagement with Duchess Sophie, another figure quietly rising in strategic relevance. These weren't random alignments, these were alliances, and they sent a clear message to those paying attention. Laura was quietly assembling a coalition not of titles, but of trust. Inside the palace, discussions took on a colder tone. There was speculation that Laura, unlike her brother, wasn't seeking public favor. She was positioning herself as indispensable, first in the royal arts committees, then in cross-generational family engagements. She was reshaping her identity not as Camilla's daughter, but as a unifying cultural force within the firm. Invitations to Laura's gallery events now included key members of the royal household. Her influence bled into the monarchy's image management, and eventually the line between unofficial and ceremonial became dangerously thin. What truly unsettled King Charles, according to insiders, was the realization that Laura had attended 3 consecutive state functions, 2 of which were never meant to include non-working royals. Her name wasn't on the initial guest lists. Yet there she was, seated just close enough to be seen, just prominent enough to make a statement. When Charles questioned how this had happened, aides could only shrug. "She's become a fixture, sir," one reportedly said. That word fixture cut deeper than expected. Behind closed doors, questions began to circulate. Was Laura preparing for an honorary royal position? A new role that wouldn't breach the technicalities of succession, but would grant her formal recognition? Was this Camilla's long game all along place Laura where Tom had pushed too hard? Some believed Laura's strategy was more insidious than her brother's brashness. She didn't seek to be a royal, she aimed to become irreplaceable to the royals. For King Charles, the thought was suffocating. A monarchy already plagued by shifting public loyalty now faced internal infiltration by a bloodline that wasn't even supposed to be there. Laura had crossed no rules, broken no laws, made no public demands, and yet, step by step, she was walking deeper into the monarchy's most sacred spaces, and no one knew how to stop her without starting a war. As Camilla's children gained ground, old royal blood began to revolt, and Charles's most trusted ally issued him a chilling warning. "She's called the Steel of the Monarchy for a reason." Princess Anne reportedly stormed into a private audience with her brother, King Charles, and delivered a warning that would shake him to his core. "If you let Camilla rewrite the order of succession, you'll lose the family." It wasn't a diplomatic conversation. It wasn't wrapped in etiquette or softened by protocol. It was raw, it was real, and it was long overdue. Princess Anne, who had for decades carried the royal weight with unmatched discipline, finally broke her silence. She had watched the rise of Camilla with tight-lipped reservation, tolerated the growing presence of Tom and Laura with forced civility, but the whispers of their creeping influence had now become alarms. For Anne, the line had been crossed, and when Charles summoned her to Windsor to discuss the mounting tension, he wasn't prepared for what was coming. The confrontation was described by insiders as thunderous. Anne didn't mince words. She accused her brother of allowing sentiment to compromise sovereignty. She questioned how far he would let Camilla's family push before the very bloodline of Windsor became diluted. With icy precision, she listed moments when Laura and Tom had been inserted into royal events without cause. She highlighted the silent shifts in palace protocol, the reassignments, the new alliances forming around Camilla's children. And then came the ultimatum. You're not just king, you're still a brother, and if you don't act, you'll break what's left of this family. Anne's fury was not just about tradition, it was about legacy. She had sacrificed everything for the crown, her privacy, her comfort, her personal ambition, and now she was watching it slowly being rebranded, reshaped by outsiders who had never paid that price. Camilla, in Anne's eyes, was more than an interloper. She was a disruptor. And if Charles didn't realize that, then the monarchy was heading toward a fracture it might never recover from. Witnesses said Anne walked out of that room without waiting for a reply. She had said what she came to say, and the message had landed. The fallout was immediate. Charles cancelled 2 public appearances and retreated to Sandringham, where he reportedly spent 3 days in isolation. No aides, no meetings. Just hours of silence, punctuated by brief, solitary walks around the estate. When he finally re-emerged, he looked changed, hollowed. Yes, but also hardened. Something in Anne's words had cut through. Perhaps it was the bluntness, perhaps the familial appeal, or maybe it was the dawning realization that the problem wasn't just public optics, it was internal rebellion, the kind that couldn't be silenced with press releases or palace spin. But Anne's warning wasn't the only force pressing down on him. While family had delivered the emotional reckoning, another threat was forming quietly in the shadows of the royal court. And this one didn't speak in ultimatums, it spoke in evidence, in strategy, in consequences. And once Charles opened that leather-bound file from his most trusted advisors, the weight of the crown would never feel the same again. But the true blow came not from family, but from within Charles's own advisory circle. A secret report that forced his hand, a leather-bound dossier, locked in a safe, and delivered directly to the king's hands. It contained what insiders call the succession time bomb, a full investigation into Camilla's children and their entanglements with power players, foreign investors and questionable donors. The document was not meant to exist. Aristocratic circles known to carry disdain for the Windsor establishment were seen reaching out. Prominent figures who had once kept their distance from Camilla during her rise were now openly attending her private gatherings. She was, it seemed, laying the groundwork for something separate, a legacy not tethered to Charles, nor reliant on royal protocol. The Queen may have been publicly loyal to the crown, but privately, she was shifting her weight to her own foundation. What unfolded between Charles and Camilla behind closed doors remains tightly guarded, but the change in their public dynamic was impossible to ignore. No more affectionate glances, no more hand-holding at events. Separate arrivals, distant body language, and noticeably colder energy. They're co-rulers in name only now, one palace official confided. It's a royal marriage in freefall just without the press release. The emotional fracture had cut deep, and though Charles had acted to preserve the institution, he had simultaneously shattered the unity at the very top of it. But while the world focused on Camilla's cold revenge, another threat was rising, one that could unravel everything Charles just fought to preserve. As the monarchy staggered from scandal to resolution, Prince William emerged with calm authority. But behind the scenes, sources say he's begun reshaping the institution in his own image, firmly shutting the door on Camilla's bloodline, and marking the dawn of a new royal order in the aftermath of Charles's midnight decree. While the institution reeled from the seismic shift, it was William who stepped forward, not with grand speeches or sweeping gestures, but with measured silence and precise moves. There was no celebration, no triumph. Just a quiet realignment of power that told those watching closely, the future has already arrived. Though he had kept his distance throughout the internal war, insiders confirmed that William had quietly endorsed his father's decision, perhaps not vocally, but through subtle affirmations and key nods to advisors behind palace doors. He understood what was at stake. The monarchy had to survive, and to do that, it needed to be reset, and that reset could not include Camilla's lineage. Within weeks, William's influence became undeniable. Royal patronages once linked to Camilla's children began to quietly shift hands. Events they once frequented were now being led by younger royals, with revised agendas that bore the markings of Kensington's communications team. Camilla's initiatives, especially those with ambiguous lines between public and personal, were either reviewed or placed on indefinite pause. At first, the changes seemed procedural, but then came the erasures, subtle, methodical, and irreversible. Mentions of Tom and Laura were removed from official web pages. Their photographs at certain engagements were replaced with newer images. It was a digital purge carried out not with malice, but with intention. At the center of this transformation was not just William, but Catherine. As Camilla receded from the public's favor, Kate quietly stepped into the vacuum. Without claiming the role, she began embodying it. Where Camilla once cut ribbons and delivered speeches, Kate now stood. Where Camilla led, Kate guided, and the public responded. Polls surged in her favor. Media narratives shifted. The monarchy, once fractured, was beginning to look whole again, but with a different face at its core. And while Charles remained the reigning monarch, all eyes knew where the real momentum was building. Behind the scenes, concerns over Charles's health only deepened the shift. Whispers of fatigue, of private treatments, of shorter engagements, none officially confirmed, yet all consistently reported, fueled the sense that William was no longer just the heir apparent. He was already stepping into the frame. Meetings once led by Charles were increasingly being handled by William's team. Policy discussions, international engagements, even Commonwealth initiatives began listing his input as essential. It wasn't a coronation, but it was a transfer. One that was already underway, quiet as thunder. And through it all, the most glaring confirmation of this new order was what was missing any sign of Camilla's children. Not a word. Not a gesture. They had been absorbed into silence, as if history had rewritten itself in real time. No drama, no expulsion, just absence. And that, perhaps, was the clearest message of all. William wasn't punishing them, he was ensuring they would never return. The royal family has survived wars, divorces, scandals, and death, but this moment marked the severing of a bloodline, a quiet war in velvet halls. And the echoes of it are only just beginning to be heard. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.